Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. This is me again, Dr. Samah, and this is AA100A, and we're starting a new chapter, like I said. And this chapter happens to be, or promises actually, promises to be very interesting. Again, it's a continuation of the assessment that we make of people. Like we agreed, we don't take things for granted anymore. We don't take sources for granted. We take whatever other people say with a grain of salt because in most of the cases we find that people are perhaps biased against. People are not given what they deserve in terms of credit, and we have seen that with Kilibatra, and we have learned the lesson. And obviously, between what we have said about Kilibatra in the first class and what we have said in the third or the fourth class, I mean, between the two stages, a lot of water went under the bridge, like they say, in terms of um, you know facts and counterfacts, but we came out solid, um, and perhaps allied in our views and opinion about Cleopatra, that she wasn't as bad as they wanted us to believe. Yeah, at least this is how I saw her. And I think you share the sentiment. Lots of us are of the opinion that she was more sinned against than sinning. The fact that it depends on what end of perspective you're looking from. If you happen to be misogynist, if you happen to have perhaps a male mentality that only sees men, you're going to say that she shouldn't have been there. Why did she do this? Why did she do that? She's doesn't have perhaps morals. But if you're pragmatic, if you look at things from perhaps the political end of perspective, you would say that she was trying to forge alliances. She was trying to get Egypt out of the chaos that it was suffering from. So she should be given credit rather than denigrated and referred to as sensual and as um, somebody whose concerns are all about material pleasures and fleshly pleasures and all these kinds of things. We're likely to do the self same thing. We are going to hear a lot of talk about Christopher Marlowe as being much of a macho, in the sense that who was more or less like a maverick, if you're familiar with the word maverick or maverick, perhaps another pronunciation, is somebody who doesn't follow the herd, somebody who is perhaps different, much of a dissenting voice in a multitude of conformity. We normally refer to people who are not, um, you know, who are not from the common run. We refer to them as non-conformists. Um, and obviously, non-conformism, if I can call it this way, is with a price. And so sometimes you have to pay very heavily for your dissenting views, for being different. And this is what we're going to see also with Christopher Moore, the fact that he is different, different in talent, and also different in his views. His views are never orthodox. Orthodox means that you are conforming. Whatever other people are saying, you just follow, and you're happy with this. No, obviously he asks questions and he never settles for easy answers. Okay, and this is we're talking about a time when conservatism and following party lines was or were important, but he is perhaps cut in a different way, as we're going to see. Let me share the agenda. Let me share the book and see how we're going to handle Christopher Marlowe. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay.
I can.
No, this is not what I want. Let me go back to the. Okay. So I think we can see that, right?
Yes. No. Yes. Right.
Okay. Okay. So what do we have? Like I said, we have Christopher Marlowe, and part of the title is Dr. Faustus, and Dr. Faustus is if Christopher Marlowe is the creator, we refer to Dr. Faustus as the creation. Dr. Faustus is a creation of Christopher Marlowe. Christopher Marlowe wrote the play that we now know as Dr. Faustus. The fact that we're having the two in the title would, of course, mean something. We're obviously, by having them, the two of them in the title, we're trying to underline the correspondence and the parallels that we are going to notice between the two. So obviously, when you have characters, if you're an author, if you are a writer, and you have characters, some of them may serve as your what do they call your mouth piece or your um, uh, spokesman or spokeswoman. They communicate your ideas. They get your messages across. Sometimes they are direct, and you can almost tell that perhaps Dr. Faustus is very similar to Christopher Marlowe. And sometimes they are subtle or indirect. You'll have to perhaps make the effort in order to underline the comparison and the parallels between the two. So, if you ask me, um, the parallels are not hard to pinpoint and spot. Anyway, so when I say Christopher Marlowe, does the name ring any bells? I'm asking you.
All what I know it about him, he was.
I
I
need remember this point of order that we agreed on. Whenever you come to the mic, you need to say I am Nadia, I am Mona, I am Sameh, I am Ahmed.
okay. I'm so sorry. My name is Bashayr.
Um, okay, and don't Bashir, don't say my name is or I am because this is long. Just say
Okay,
Bashir Ali, for example, or Sameh Abdikilil, and that would be it. Okay, Yalla, go ahead.
okay. I remember I wrote about him. He was a friend for Shakespeare, I think, and writer.
Mm.
Um, there is some, how I say it. I think he was atheist.
Or was an atheist. You're trying to atheist
Yeah,
is somebody who
atheist.
does not believe in God. This is what you're trying to say, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Mm. Mm.
And that's it. I just know a little about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So one thing came out of what Bashair said, that she heard that he was an atheist, and obviously an atheist.
I'm sorry.
No, 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 I'm
I
just
think I have the tissue.
no, no, I'm not saying that I'm not undermining what you're saying. I'm trying to say that I mean, if you refer to somebody as an atheist, this is a big thing, right? This is
Yes.
what we inherited from the scholarship on Christopher Marlowe. So, as we agreed, we're going to take what people say with a grain of salt. If they tell us that he is an atheist, we'll have to check and see whether this is correct or wrong. This is the lesson that we have learned from our encounter with Cleopatra and the great deal of misinformation that we got about her, right? Okay. So anybody else? Christopher Marlowe? Does the name ring any bells?
Rima Sawas.
Rima. Okay, go ahead.
He was an English.
Yeah, he was English. Very good. Yes. What
And
else?
he was a playwright and poet.
Mm-hmm.
And his well-known play was Dr. Faustus.
Interesting. Yes. Yeah, nice. Nice. Thank you, Rima. Thank you so much.
Dima.
Dima. Dima.
Y-S. Dima.
Fima. F.
S.
Thema. Thema.
No,
Right?
S.
Okay, Seema. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, Seema. Thank you so much. Can we have, okay, let's move to Dr. Faustus. When I say Dr. Faustus, does the name also ring any bells?
Yes, Ahmad.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
I think he had many skills, not just a writer or author, or
Mm.
he was a translator. I think. I
Mm.
thought maybe he was reading and writing Latino or maybe
Mm.
all the European languages.
Yeah.
That some people said he was a translator uh, from language to language to the royal family in England, and help. And he was the second famous person after Shakespeare.
That's interesting. Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Anybody else? Dr. Faustus?
Yes, doctor.
Yes.
Dr. Faustus is the protagonist of the play.
Mm-hmm.
He likes to breaking rules and has like a conflict between good and bad, evil and goodness, like
Mm.
that.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So let's go and look at the map. Okay. Yeah. Unless somebody has something to share with us.
Doctor,
Yes.
two different versions of the play were published in the Jacobean era several years later
Okay.
about the Dr. Faustus.
That's good.
Yeah, it's an Elizabethan tragedy by Christopher Marlowe, based
Yeah.
on German stories.
That's interesting. What's your name?
Bashayar Ahmed.
Bashair. Bashair. Thank you, Bashair.
Thank you, Doctor.
Doctor.
Yes. Can you kindly mute your mic, Bashair? Okay.
Sure.
Yes.
Yes, Doctor.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you mean her or me?
Which okay, okay, I have finished. I said what I okay.
Okay. Thank you,
Shall I go
Bashair.
ahead? Thank you, Doctor.
Now we move to the Wahir. Okay. Obviously, we're going to wait for long.
Okay, can I talk right now?
Yeah, please, please.
Okay, so I actually read the script of the play. I think it has a gothic element to it because he was a scientist in a German university. He was a person that really appreciated science, and he loved reading a lot of books, and somehow he turned into the black magic thing. And he got interested in necromancy, and I think a written were also conjuring. And somehow Manistopheles, I think his name, popped in his face, and he said, okay, sell your soul to the devil. So I think it's interesting that it has a gothic element, and there is a lot of characters, a lot of references for how do you say it, like biblical character, I think, in the play. Like
You're doing a good job. I just want to yes, I just want to get this I mean straight. So when you say that that has gothic elements to it, you're talking about the supernatural elements, the fact that we have Mephistopheles, he talks to the devil, right?
Yeah.
This is what you mean by gothic, right?
Yeah. And there is also a part somewhere in the play that he went to a king, I think, and the king asked him to resurrect very
To raise somebody
famous
from the
figure.
dead. Yes.
Yeah, and he
couldn't.
I read a lot of versions to it, and it's interesting that there is, as somebody said, there is two versions, and there is a few differences here and there, but the main idea is still the same. The interest in black magic, and then the fact that he was making a deal with the devil for 24 years of something. I don't know.
Yes, that's interesting. Yeah, these are very beautiful insights, and I thank you for them. What's your name?
Shamsa.
Shamsa. Very beautiful ideas here, Shamsa. Okay.
Yes,
so
may I add, Doctor?
Absolutely. What's your name?
My name is Yasser.
Yasser, go ahead.
Yeah, I think he has some ideas against the charge, against the religion. That's why they said that he might be an atheist. But I think
thank you for using the word or the phrase or the sentence. He may be an atheist. He may be. We're not saying that he is or he was an atheist, because we're like we said.
We are not sure yet, but the ideas.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, but at the end, they found him murdered, and there is a knife inside his eye. He wrote only 13 plays, and if he lived more, I think he will pass Shakespeare famous. But they didn't let him live for a long time. They murdered him.
I mean, is it a conspiracy theory that you're nursing or something, or you're weaving? Because we live in the age of conspiracy theories, right?
Yeah, I think one of the famous characters he wrote is Lucifer Morningstar. I think there is a series in Netflix for him. It's one of the famous characters.
Yeah, they always, whenever they talk him, they always talk about him in relation to Shakespeare, and the fact that Shakespeare was kind of envious of his talent, and the fact that people went to extremes, and they said that perhaps Shakespeare had him killed, which, like I said, that could be a pattern of conspiracy theories that we don't want to get into. We're going to deal with the facts. We're going to also, like the Romantics did, we're going to divorce the writer from his biography. The writer at one point would be judged based on the talent that he shows or has in this, despite of the fact that he may be, like I said, bad in character. He gets perhaps upset and angry easily, and that would land him in trouble more often than not. We'll talk about all these issues, and as you can see, we're talking about a very rich character. We're talking about a talented individual and somebody whose life, however short it was, is full of debates and arguments. This is what we're bringing to the class this chapter around, inshallah. Okay. So let's go to the items that we're going to cover over perhaps the two classes that we will have on Christopher Marlowe. We're going to start with an introduction, perhaps about the age, and we're going to kind of set Christopher Marlowe against his age. Remember, he is an Elizabethan dramatist. We'll talk about the Elizabethan age and the marketplace of ideas that he was surrounded with, and whether he got inspired by them or not, and how much he is, like I said, he is following the ideas, and how much he is dissenting and deviating from them. After we finish talking about Christopher Marlowe, we will go to Dr. Faustus. And Dr. Faustus happens to be one of his best plays. And again, the reason why there is this choice of Dr. Faustus is that Dr. Faustus has a lot of correspondence. I'm talking about the main character, Dr. Faustus himself. As you're going to see, we're going to establish a lot of parallels, a lot of correspondence between Dr. Faustus and his creator, Christopher Marlowe. On the fringe of all of that, we're going to read the play in its context, and obviously the context is the Renaissance, which is a period that is full of ideas and thoughts. We'll talk about the play as a product of the Renaissance, and how different would it be if it's written in the Renaissance and if it is written in the Middle Ages. And obviously the Middle Ages is the period that came before the Renaissance. We'll talk about the characteristics of each and every period. And then we're going to go to Dr. Faustus itself, and we'll take, of course, dealing with the play in an exhaustive way. Covering it from cover to cover would be a luxury that we may not be able to afford, given the fact that we have lots of things to do. So we're going to talk about the significant parts in the play, parts that would contribute to the overall impression that the writer of the chapter is trying to create with us. And of course, we might differ on the interpretation of the moves that Dr. Faustus makes. Sometimes we're going to end up either for or against him, because you don't have this what do they call it, total agreement over somebody. People differ, which is quite natural. While talking about the play, we're going to talk about technical issues. We'll try not to forget the fact that this is not history, that this is a play, and we'll talk about the characteristics of plays and how they are made. and whether it would be a better idea if we go to perhaps the theater and see it performed, and the difference between a text and a play, a performed play. And we're going to talk about the interpretations and again, one technical thing about plays at the time would be the idea of tragedy. Tragedy as a technique, as a genre that has, features and characteristics. We'll have time perhaps to talk about the difference between um, Elizabethan tragedy, the tragedy that Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe wrote, and Greek tragedy. Greek tragedy would be the prototype or the original model that Christopher Marlowe and Shakespeare followed, of course, with tweaking and modifications that they did in order to perhaps meet the expectations of a different audience. We'll perhaps finish off talking about the play Dr. Faustus by checking whether it is a morality play, and morality plays were those types of plays that were famous in the Middle Ages, or a tragedy, and tragedies are those kinds of plays that were famous in the Renaissance and in the Elizabethan age. And we'll end up wrapping all of that and talk about the author and his hero, and we're going to establish final parallels between the two. So it's an interesting journey, I promise you. Okay, so do we have aims? Yeah, of course. So what is it that we're trying to say? And what are our aims? One big aim would be the idea of perhaps teaching you how to close read. Close reading is a skill that you need to develop. Close reading means that you read the text very closely, in the sense that you try to focus your attention on technical formal issues in the text that would lead to the ideas that would help the writer deliver the messages that you want to deliver. So our starting point in close reading would be to address the technical and the formal aspects of a text. And by the way, tomorrow I have a workshop on close reading, and I would be more glad if you attend it. It's at 4 p.m. tomorrow, inshallah. It's specifically and exclusively about close reading and how to approach the literary text. Again, close reading is on our agenda in this chapter. We're going to also talk to you about the idea of genres. And by genre, we mean types, literary types. When we talk about literature and its genres, if I say that the novel is a genre, the short story is another genre, plays are a genre. So these are different genres when we talk about literature. If I talk about the arts, for example, so under arts, we would have music as a genre, we would have painting as a genre, sculpture as a genre, and so on and so forth. So we're talking about those generic elements and lines that we can spot in Dr. Faust. What kind of genre is it? So if we say it's a play, so what kind of play, what kind of genre? Is it a comedy or a tragedy or a morality play? Uh, Again, we'll talk about themes and ideas in the play. Again, we're going to also talk to set the play against its historical background and see whether it reflects ideas that were prevalent at the time, ideas that were in the air, and how Christopher Marlowe manipulates these ideas. Is he perhaps, if there are orthodox ideas, is he following them or is he challenging and deviating from them? Again, will one of the approaches that we will be embracing would be the idea of biography and the biographical reading of a text. Biographical means that you read the text against what you know about the author and his biography. We talk about perhaps when he was born and what happened in his childhood, whether he was a happy child or not, and then when he grew up and what he did and what he didn't. And so the biographical approach is one of the approaches that we deal with when we approach a text. Obviously, it's not in fashion anymore. People nowadays focus on the idea or on the formal aspects of a work of art. They say we shouldn't be, before I read the text, uh, um, I mean, I shouldn't do anything before I read the text. I shouldn't read the background. I shouldn't read the background of the Age of Horse. I shouldn't read about the author, his life, because that would influence the way I interpret the play. No, you need to divorce the text of its biographical and historical elements. You deal with it um, in an independent way, so that you don't get influenced by what other people are saying about the biography of the author. And the next thing you know is that we all have the same opinion and the same views of a text. If we read a play or a poem or a novel for that matter with the background of the age and its background, with the biography of the author in mind, all our views are going to be identical. And this is not literature. This is not appreciation of literature. Appreciation of literature would mean that we come up with different views, as different as we are, because we come from different backgrounds and our levels of understanding and sensibilities obviously are different. So the idea of approaching the text in a biographical way is not highly recommended. The idea of approaching a text in a historical way is not also recommended. So your starting point would be the text, and then after that you may know about the author. You may know about, the age in which he was operating and stuff. We'll address all these things, inshallah. Okay. Again, don't lose sight of the fact that we're talking about the idea of reputation. We're talking about people getting reputed for no obvious reasons, and people not getting reputed in spite of the fact that they have all it takes to be reputed and to be famous. We're talking about what is it that people that makes people famous, and what is it that makes them otherwise. Um, so it's Christopher Marlowe, everyone. And it's the literary reputation of Marlowe that we're addressing. Marlowe, of course, lived between 1564 and 1593. When you look at this period, when you look at history, you'll know that this was the time when Queen Elizabeth was the sitting queen of the land. When you check also this period, you'll know that he was contemporary to Shakespeare. They used to live in the same age. Um, and obviously, when we mention Shakespeare, we talk about you know, talent. We talk about influence. Who influenced whom? That would be a question that we need to answer. We're going to see what even Shakespeare had to say about Marlowe. Again, after we're done with this historical background about Marlowe, about his age, we move to Dr. Faustus. Again, we'll talk about several aspects of the play and the techniques involved, so that in the final analysis we come up with an interpretation that is independent of perhaps the forces of history and the forces of biography. Um, there is a great deal of talk that we don't know whether this was, Shakespeare was quoted as saying what he said or not, but somehow in one of the movies, it was in 1998, we have Shakespeare presented as one of the characters, and then the movie was called Shakespeare in Love, and we had Shakespeare saying that two of his very famous plays were uh, built uh, on works by Christopher Marlowe, and the fact that Christopher Marlowe was a great source of inspiration for Shakespeare. Whether this is true or not, that remains to be seen. But at least if it tells you something, it tells you that we are in for a great talent. We're not talking about somebody who is, and we're not talking about just another playwright. No, he was all over the place in terms of reputation, literary reputation. He was one of the great talents, and his talent was recognized at the time. And had it not been for his quote unquote irresponsible nature, he could have passed off as a great figure. He could have lived even longer. Somebody said that he died at the age of perhaps 29 or 30. And obviously, this is, you know, untimely kind of death. People normally die if they are, they die beyond that, right? It takes more years for people to. So, do we have, was it natural death that we're talking about? No, it wasn't natural death. It was a fight that he had with somebody. This is obviously him. He looks like Shakespeare. I'm hopeful that this is not Shakespeare. This is him, obviously. Um, remember, this is taken of him when he was young, because he died very untimely, very early. They wouldn't have taken any other pictures of him. Um, so he lived a turbulent kind of life, rising from humble origins to attend Cambridge University, working probably as a government spy, and combining an astonishingly productive career as poet and playwright. Um, Again, you need to consider the fact that he comes from humble origins. I mean, his family was rich. And you need to always remember that he didn't used to lead this simple kind of life, accepting whatever is up for grabs. No, he wasn't cut in this way. And he promises us not to behave this way, as we're going to see in a minute. Again, there is a great deal of talk about his infamy, if you like, about the fact that reputation wasn't all. I mean, his reputation wasn't all positive. Uh, they would People would talk about the fact that he was not on good terms with the authorities, with the police. He had those fights and he has those illegal activities, and he ended up killed in a tavern or in a pub. Again, um, we don't know for sure whether this is exaggerated or not, but something is obvious about Marlowe. The fact that he has this penchant for violence and law breaking, the fact that he doesn't settle for this type of easy life that you normally associate with writers. Writers are quite and calm human beings. This is at least the impression that we get about them. That in order for them to produce and in order for them to write, they need quiet places. They need, I mean, an easy kind of life. They need to be left alone so that they can go to their ivory towers and produce. This is the general impression that we have of writers. But with Christopher Marlowe, it's totally different. Christopher Marlowe is this type of law breaking individual, somebody who would um, ask all types of questions. He wouldn't settle, like I said, for easy answers. He would challenge whatever you tell him, and that would bring him in trouble with the different institutions of society, whether we're talking about religion, the institution of religion, whether we're talking about the institution of the police, whether we're talking about morality, and the other institutions. He wouldn't again settle for this type of life that we expect of artists and literary figures. Again, if you read his biography, you're going to have lots of and incidents. I mean, and he was entangled in a number of them, and he would have to go to the court, and he would have to perhaps be put on trial, and he defends himself and stuff. Again, he would die a mysterious kind of death at the age of 29. Um, and during the time, he was also convicted and he was charged with having unorthodox beliefs. I mean, whether we're talking about the existence of God, whether we're talking about traditional religion, you name it. And again, it's is it all bad news about Marlowe? No. Lots of people are acknowledging the fact that he was very talented. Um, one of them happens to be, um, like I said, Shakespeare himself said very nice stuff about it. But of course, there are other people who denigrated him, perhaps out of envy and out of jealousy. One of them happens to be Thomas Kidd. And Thomas Kidd was a playwright, and he used to write revenge tragedies. And he would accuse Christopher Marlowe of holding monstrous opinions. So opinions that are monstrous, opinions that are and he would say that he was intemperate, and the fact that he had a cruel heart. So when I say monstrous opinions, it means that he was not he would challenge the ideas of the time. So if people say something uh, um, that would have the direction of the right, he would go the other direction. Again, we're not judging, because everyone has a right to his or her opinion. Again, another biographer, or perhaps another individual from the period, a spy by the name of Richard Baines, um, would portray him as a scoffer and as a heretic. And he would say that he used to mock religion, and he would, according to Richard Baines, he says that Christopher Morley was quoted as saying that religion is used as a tool by the powerful in order to keep men in awe. I wouldn't say what other stuff he was quoted as saying, because it's very offensive. Bain also accused Marlowe of homosexuality. As you can see, that there is a great deal of denigration, there is a great deal of attack on Christopher Marlowe and his character, and we're not too sure that what they said about him was true. Again, you would also think of the Roman sources and what they said about Cleopatra. Again, you would also have to be very cautious with the ideas that are presented about Christopher Marlowe and his views and his life. There is another individual from the period by the name of Thomas Beard, and Thomas Beard was Puritan. And if you're Puritan, it means that you have extreme ideas when it comes to religion. You're too religious. So Thomas Beard, the Puritan, charged or accused Marlowe of atheism, the fact that he was an atheist and he was impious, or he shows impiety. Impiety means that he does not behave in a religious way. And he would say that Marlowe would deny God and his quote unquote son, Christ. Again, you would see that people, some of those, those who used to attack Marlowe would feel relieved, would feel happy and glad when they got to know that he was killed, and they would say that this is some kind of retribution, divine retribution, or divine revenge. The fact that uh, um, um, he died that way because of his unorthodox ideas, because of his ideas against God. Though they would see that as some kind of judgment upon Marlowe's sins. Is it all bad news? Don't we have people who would give Marlowe some credit? Yes, we have. So at the time, there were people who would appreciate what Marlowe was about in terms of literary talent. One of them happens to be George Peele, and George Peele was a fellow dramatist, and he would say that Marlowe was the muse's darling. This is very interesting and very poetic. Let's unpack this kind of phrase, muse's darling. Of course, you know what a darling is. If two people are in love, you have the darling is obviously it's the man in the relationship, or even the lady. But darling would be one of the two lovers, and muses are. There was this idea at the time and even before that poets don't actually write poetry because they are talented. They write poetry because they get inspiration from the muses, and the muses are the goddesses of poetry according to Greek mythology. So in Greek mythology, the muses are the goddesses of poetry. They obviously they have gods and goddesses for everything, and for poetry they have the muses. So to be the darling of the muses is obviously a praise, right? So it means that because of how poetic um, you are, people would um, take it that the muses were favoring you over the other poets. You, as a poet, were their darling. They would give you what they don't give other people. Again, we have another contemporary, another playwright from the period, and he would say that he would say, this is Thomas Haywood, and he would say that Christopher Marlowe is the best of poets in that age. Um, Again, if we move on, we're going to see that the upcoming ages are going to be kind of influenced by these views, and these views were for the most part negative about him. So you will have people in the 18th century saying something similar about him until we reach the 19th century. When we reach the 19th century, we will have a different um, view of Christopher Marlowe. The view or the views of people in the 19th century would be uh, different in a positive way. They would focus on his talent. They would say, okay, perhaps he had his negative side when it comes to his life and how he used to live his life, but this is not obviously our concern. Our concern is whether he was talented or not, and of course he was. So in the 19th century, Christopher Marlowe will come to his own. For somebody to come to his own, it means that he would be, considered or looked upon in a positive way. So they would give him some of the dignity and some of the prestige that he has been deprived of on account of his private life. So they would say, no, this has to stop. And actually, this was a trend at the time. Remember, this was the time of the Romantic poets, and we'll talk about them perhaps later. And the Romantic movement, and with the Romantic movement in the 19th century and the late 18th century, we have we have a paradigm shift where the focus is no longer on the period and on the private life of the individual. The focus would be on the talent, on whether you're talented or not. If you're talented, they don't normally look at how you lead your life. And the period was the period of exceptional talents. People who also have a great deal of um, controversy to their characters. They have contested reputations on account of their views, whether these views were political or religious. One of them happens to be, for example, Shelley. Shelley was a romantic poet, and he has unorthodox beliefs. When it comes to politics, he used to perhaps turn people against the government. He wasn't happy with the political atmosphere of the time. But he was accepted because he had talent. So they applied the same strategy with Marlowe. They said, we don't kind of, perhaps we don't subscribe to his views when it comes to religion and politics, but we deal with him as an artist or as a poet, as a literary figure. If he is good, if he has talents enough, that would be one reason why we would accept him and recognize him. We don't deal with his private life. His private life is his own. So, like I said, we had Shelley, who was also a maverick. We also have Lord Byron, who was also having those unorthodox beliefs. Shelley, of course, was an avowed atheist. He would admit it. He would acknowledge the fact that he does not believe in God. So those people have different scandals, but that would not prevent people from appreciating their literary talent. Okay? I've been talking for quite some time. If you have something to say, go ahead. Would you like to say something? I've been monopolizing the talk. I keep asking people not to monopolize the talk, and the next thing you know is that I'm doing it myself. Hello?
Yes, doctor?
So how do you find the guy so far?
Yes, doctor, I with you.
Okay. So how do you find Marlowe so far?
I have an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was trying to be extraordinary person. So he became famous in a different way, not in a romantic way, but in something that it's not got used in that period.
Okay, thank you, Bashair.
No, I'm Taima.
Oh, okay. Saima?
Taima with T.
Taima. Yeah, Taima. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're moving to the play now, Dr. Faustus. And again, the reason why we're featuring Dr. Faustus is because of the parallels that we have between Dr. Faustus and Christopher Marlowe. To the extent that people would say that Dr. Faustus, the character, is no more than Christopher Marlowe himself. Again, why are we saying that? Because of the ideas that Dr. Faustus wouldn't bring to the conversation. The fact that he would show lots of the radical beliefs that um, Christopher Marlowe used to believe in. Again, whether Christopher Marlowe had radical beliefs that are not in line with the prevailing beliefs of the time, whether this is true or wrong, we have again to deal with them um, in a cautious way. We said that there is a great deal that may not be accurate, and we don't know the motives and the circumstances. Again, if you have a negative opinion expressed or given by um, a competing dramatist or playwright, you have to stop. Perhaps he was jealous. Perhaps Christopher Marlowe was making more money than he used to do, I mean, the other person. So we have to explore the motives, and we need to also be familiar with the circumstances so that um, we can appreciate what people are saying, whether it's what they are saying is positive or negative about Christopher Marlowe. Again, at the core of Dr. Faustus would be the idea that the hero will sell his soul to the devil in return for 24 years of power and pleasure. So what do you think of this? What do you think of this pact or this deal? The main idea would be that we have the protagonist or the hero, and he will sell his soul to the devil in return for 24 years of power and pleasure. Absolute power, absolute pleasure, and absolute knowledge. Would you do that? Would you sell your soul to the devil in return for 50 years of power and pleasure and knowledge? Absolute everything. Absolute power, absolute pleasure, absolute knowledge. Would you do that? Hello.
Absolutely not. I'm not crazy.
Yeah, absolutely not, right? Even if we make them 100 years, 100 years of absolute power, absolute pleasure.
Why would I live? Why would I want to live for 100 years, doctor? Seriously.
It's a limited time offer.
I don't want any limited time offer. I just want to die. خلاص.
Remember, it's absolute power, absolute health, perhaps.
I
No.
think at that time they were liking the idea of living forever. They want to find the secret of it and something like that.
So this is like I said, the play is based on this idea, the idea that somehow a human being believes that he can, you know, can have absolute power and pleasure, and this is obviously going beyond your limits as a human being. As human beings, we have limitations and we have to respect and honor them, right? Otherwise, you would be trying to compete with God, right? And this is one of the problems that we have in the play, the fact that Dr. Faustus is trying to to be an earthly god. He would ask the devil to allow him to perhaps raise the dead, which he wouldn't do. He would ask him to would ask him for a lot of things, but the devil himself would say, "No, I cannot do this." Right? So if you cannot do this and that, it means that you're still limited. So
That's it.
you have sold your soul for nothing. If after 24 years you will be thrown into hell, it means it wasn't worth it, right? And that would leave us with this idea of to where to put Christopher Marlowe. Is he giving us an example of a rebellious character? Is he trying to tell us that this is the fate of people who overreach, people who break the law and try to assume positions that are theirs? Is he trying to give us a lesson so that we can learn and never try to mess with the grand scheme of things, if you like? Or is he trying to say that man has the right to go beyond his limits? Are you following? So
Yes, doctor.
yeah, somebody was trying to say something. Go ahead.
Yes, I want to ask you, did he was impacted or inspired by the Greek mythology?
He was impacted and inspired by the Renaissance, Renaissance or Renaissance, by the way, the two pronunciations are correct.
Oh, yes.
Was about the belief in the human being. We have a shift of focus. In the Middle Ages, it was all religion and the focus was on God. But with the Renaissance, the focus was on the human being, the fact that the human being has powers and has hidden powers, and those powers need to be unleashed so that he can do the impossible. So obviously, Christopher Marlowe, in one of the interpretations, was under the influence of the Renaissance concept of man, the fact that man, with capital M, can be another God, but on earth. Are you getting the idea? So
Yes.
if we agree with the interpretation that he is presenting his character or his hero as a rebellious character who wouldn't settle for easy answers, a character who believes in the absolute, um, you know, powers or power of the human. Again, you would think of it in a different way. Like I said, perhaps he's by having this guy, having this pact with the devil, and then after 24 years, his life is stripped out of him and thrown into hell. By doing that, perhaps he's trying to give us a lesson. He's trying to say, listen, if you think twice about it, this is where you will be in hell. You will rot in hell, inshallah. Perhaps. Okay. So, where did he get his inspiration for the play from? He actually the play is based on a plot that Marlowe, Christopher Marlowe, took from a German play by the name of The History of the Damnable Life and Deserved Death of Dr. John Faustus. Isn't that very strange that he is imitating the work of somebody else? Do you think this is bad? What do you think?
No, I think it's not bad.
Mm.
Sometimes we need to take new ideas from
Yeah, so it's about how you're going to. It's a challenge, by the way. It's not easy because we have the original. People look at how you are manipulating the old plot so that you can come up with something fresh and new, right?
yes, and maybe it will be better than the old one.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying because you have your own ideas. You're only manipulating the plot, I mean, the overall structure, but you are instilling ideas that were never there in the original text. Again, perhaps there are, reasons why he's doing that to build his play on a German play. Perhaps he was trying to say he was trying to avoid being perhaps investigated by the police. They would say, "What are you doing?" Remember, the issue is very sensitive. We're talking about somebody who is having a deal with the devil, right? These are unorthodox views. These are very strange ideas. These are nonconformist ideas. If he doesn't say that I took them from perhaps somebody else in another country, they would go and ask him questions. I mean, they would even take him to court, and he might find himself jailed or something.
But doctor,
Yes.
at that period of time, people get used to challenge the church and the religious tradition.
Yes, there was this challenge, but again, you have that, I mean, the traditional and the Orthodox force, the Orthodox, people who would take you to court and you may be put in prison. It's not easy. You may have or you may exhibit nonconformist ideas, but you have to pay for them. Again, I'm stressing the fact that the reason why Christopher Marlowe was using a text or a plot from outside is that he wanted to say, these are not my ideas. He didn't want to shock people by giving them, ideas about, challenging the Christian God by rebelling against the Christian God. These were nonconformist and dissenting ideas that the society wouldn't take easily. So, what is it that they are going to do? They can take him to prison. So, as a kind of perhaps camouflage, as a kind of, I mean, in order to evade or avoid being asked questions about what he is presenting, he had this character from another culture. Again, we need to also look at the play as a product of the Renaissance or the Renaissance. So, if you read the play against the Renaissance background, you're going to find that Dr. Faustus stands in a long line of plays that would challenge the status quo, that would challenge the ideas of the time. Again, why would plays like Dr. Faustus and plays by Shakespeare and others, why would these plays show people who are um, strange in their ideas, people who would challenge the different orthodoxies of the time, whether those orthodoxies were religious or political? It was because of the Renaissance. This was a time, a period in time where, like I told you, there was a shift of interest and focus from God in the Middle Ages to man. And what perhaps contributed to this belief and this glorification of the human being was the discoveries that were uh, there at the time. The fact that at the time they started to believe in science and they came up with scientific theories that would prove things. They would use the empirical approach to things. They would experiment of things. They would also go to other countries and explore other lands that they never uh, saw or heard of before. So it was the Renaissance was the time of the scientific revolution. So with the big accomplishments that they made, they believed that man, if given the opportunity, can do whatever is impossible. So again, the play was written against this background. And of course, Shakespeare and Marlowe and the others would be under the influence of these ideas, whether they like it or not. They would be inspired by these ideas. And some of them would show enthusiasm and, and excitement about these ideas, and some of them would, um, you know, they would be affected by them, but not in a big way. So Shakespeare was also under these ideas, but when you look at his plays, you wouldn't see those challenging characters who challenge the different orthodoxies of the time, whether those orthodoxies are religious or political. But with Christopher Marlowe, it's different. He was so excited about the ideas, obviously, to the fact that he embraced them. He became one with these ideas, and when he started to write, his characters would reveal the influence that these ideas had on him. And we have the example of Dr. Faust. So you need to, when you read a play, you need to remember that Christopher Marlowe was a byproduct of the time. His play was the excuse me, excuse me, was the byproduct of the time. Okay. Was it poetry that he was using? And obviously, plays were verse plays. Verse plays means plays written in verse or in poetry. Um, Again, he would use poetry, but he would use this style of poetry that we call blank verse. So blank verse was this type of poetry. It was free, so that it can allow characters to perhaps use the language um, to express their feelings and their emotions and their thoughts. So having a purely poetic play would limit the potential and would limit the talent of the poet. and the playwright. In this case, using blank verse, which is poetry, but it's this kind of liberal style of poetry that would allow the characters to move in their speeches and to express their ideas in a more liberal, in a freer way. And here we have talk about this kind of poetry and how it is used. Do you have any questions? And here, as you can see, there is this reassurance that the writer of the chapter is trying to give you. He says, remember that you're talking about, or you're going to read a play that does not belong to your time. And obviously, the kind of English that was used at the time is different from the English that you. So you don't have to be worried. This is what the writer is trying to say. You don't have to worry about this challenge. Just keep reading. The language is going to be different, but it's not a totally different language. There are words that are, of course, not used anymore, but you still can negotiate your way easily in the text. Again, there is also the stress that it would be better if you watch the play while being performed on the stage, because there are lots of things that you're going to miss if you only read the text, because according to lots of critics, plays were meant to be performed on the stage rather than read. So your first priority would be to watch the play, and then reading can come second place. And this is, of course, for obvious reasons, because when you watch the play, you can see the actions and the reactions of the characters, how they act and react, and it shows on their faces whether they are happy, angry. They can always manipulate the level of voice. Sometimes it's high in order to perhaps express and communicate something. Sometimes it's low in order to also communicate something. These are things that you miss if you only read the text. And we're moving to Dr. Faustus in the play. Okay, so it's a play. And if we say it's a play, lots of ideas come to mind. What is so characteristic about plays? Things that we find. Let's talk about the one single thing that we have in a play, but we don't have in other genres. We don't have in the novels or the short stories or the poems, for example. What do you think? I'm sure you have been reading different genres for quite some time, and you can tell the difference. So what is it that distinguishes a play from the other genres? This is my question.
Is it dialogue and audience?
Excellent, excellent. What's your name?
Fatima Bilal.
Yeah, as Fatma is saying, it's the fact that you have dialogues, the fact that you have conversations. You have one-on-ones, if you like. But with novels, you have narration. Somebody is narrating, is telling us the story, right? In poems, poetry is obviously different. You don't have this conversational tone to it, right? So conversations and dialogues are the one distinguishing feature about plays that you may not find in other genres. Okay, so this is one thing. And then when I also say a play, or when I mention the word play, I need to also check what kind of play, because we have a menu of genres when it comes to plays and drama. You have morality plays for one. You would have tragedies, another type. You would have romantic comedies. You would have comedies. You would have for what we call farce. So these are the different types of plays that we have. And these are the most common. Again, talk about morality plays, talk about tragedies. We would talk about comedies, and we would talk about romantic comedies. So what kind of play? When we talk about Dr. Faustus, we talk actually about two types of plays. We need, perhaps by the end of our discussions on Marlowe, we need to decide whether Dr. Faustus can be called safely a morality play or can be called a tragedy. Can it be both? Yes. If it has elements of both, yeah, we can say that it is. We'll talk about that. So which is older? Uh, which genre is older, the tragedy or the morality play?
I
Of
think
course,
tragedy.
yeah, go ahead. Yes.
I think a tragedy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the tragedy because the tragedy started with the Greeks. And with the Greeks, you're talking about perhaps 2000 to 3,000 years back in time. And they start a product of the Middle Ages. And you can almost tell from their names. You can, if you reflect on the names of these genres, you can almost tell what you are in for. If you are in for a tragedy, or you're in for a morality play. So when I say tragedy, yeah, obviously there is an element of tragedy. There is an element of agony and suffering in it. Okay? If I say morality play, so there is an element of morality or morals to it or in it. Okay, so we'll talk about what a tragedy is and then move on to the morality play. So if you have a tragedy, and if you have a Greek or perhaps an Elizabethan tragedy, you would have acts, and you normally have 5 acts. An act is like a chapter in a novel. Okay, so you have 5 acts in a tragedy, and you have a progression. Progression means that we have gradual development of the idea and the thoughts in the play. You normally start off with what we call the exposition, and then after the exposition there is development of ideas, and then you reach the peak or the climax, the top of things, and then you go down the hill until you reach what we call the resolution or the denouement. So this is how a typical tragedy or a typical play for that matter goes. So what do we have in an an exposition is more or less like an introduction where the characters are presented, where we have hints about what will happen, and this is called foregrounding. Um,
Doctor,
we
I'm sorry.
sometimes call it shadowing or overshadow. Yeah, go ahead.
So it's basically like the elements of a plot.
Yeah, yes, yeah. The plot, whatever the plot is, I mean, whether it belongs to the novel genre or any other genre for that matter, is taking its roots from the plot of the tragedy with the sequence that I'm telling you about. Of course, if you talk about plots in the modern age, you don't have this kind of sequence anymore, because in the modern age, writers start from any point and then there is flashback going back to old events, and then there is movement forward. So in the modern age, we have a plot, but we don't have this natural development of events as we see in ancient and Elizabethan plays. Again, let's go back to the plot in a tragedy. Again, we start with the what we call the exposition, where characters are presented with, where there are hints about what will happen in terms of ideas, and then ideas develop, and then we reach a climax when we have perhaps a conflict, and then there is a resolution of the conflict towards the end of the play, and this is what we call the denouement or the resolution. Again, the resolution in a tragedy is a sad ending, a tragic ending, where normally the life of the protagonist is compromised. He gets killed. He has to die a tragic kind of death. Again, why that would perhaps need us to go back and see why he would have this kind of sad fate at the end. Um, Again, this was the tragedy. I mean, tragedy is normally about something big, a bigger than life issue. We're talking about big resolutions. We're talking about big challenges. We're talking about conflicts within the soul and the mind of the protagonist or the hero of the play, to the extent that we call him a tragic hero. So he is a hero. I mean, the protagonist is a hero and he has the attributes and the features of a hero. He may be a king, he may be a prince, he may be a military leader. He is somebody outstanding in his society and he does very well. Everybody likes him, obviously, but somehow he engages in actions that are bad or wrong, whether he does that, you know, because he knows what he's doing or not. This is not the issue. The idea that he commits a number of errors, and those errors would bring about his downfall at the end. So he dies in a tragic way. And of course, we feel pity and fear for him as human beings. We feel pity because he is another human being. And we feel fear because we might be tested in the same way. Sometimes you get the same testing circumstances, and you would have to also make bad choices, and you end up dying tragically as he did. So again, we're stressing the fact that the tragic hero in a tragedy is good and everything, but somehow he has a flaw within his character, and this flaw brings about uh, um, his downfall because he makes errors and mistakes, and some of them are irredeemable. You cannot change them. You don't sometimes, and this is, I think you know that you don't have we don't have control Z in life. You cannot undo what you did, right? So this is actually the tragedy of the tragic hero, the fact that he does not have control Z in his life. Once he does something, it is taken against him, and the next thing you know is that he suffers tragically and he has to die a tragic kind of death. This is tragedy. And now we'll move to the morality play. So, like I said, the morality play came way after the tragedy. And the morality play is European. If tragedy is Greek, um, the morality play is a European Middle Ages product, where the mindset was religious. People were very religious, of course, Christian, and people were, for the most part, uneducated. They didn't receive enough education at the time. So, in order for perhaps the government to reach out to them and communicate ideas and get across messages to them, they would ask or commission playwrights to write morality plays where people go and see other people acting on the stage and they can learn a great deal. So the plays were, all, for the most part, morality plays in the sense that they would give moral ideas. They would, in perhaps an indirect way, they would give people lessons as how to behave in a morally upright manner, in a religious way. Um, Again, this was a necessity because of the fact that people were not educated. So what were, I mean, we said that the themes were themes that would allow people to learn a lesson. They don't have the ability to read and write, so you wouldn't write books for them. So you would have other people acting on the stage and they go and watch the play and they learn a lesson or two in morality and in relation. Typical scenarios in morality plays was all about this conflict between evil um, and goodness. The fact that you have two forces in life, the forces of evil and the forces of goodness, and they fight within the mind and within the soul of the character. And of course, at the end, the good forces win, excuse me, would win over the bad or the evil forces. You normally have abstractions. You have ideas, and those ideas are embodied on the stage by human beings, by actors. If they want to perhaps warn them against the perhaps the minuses of eating too much, which is called gluttony. Gluttony happens to be one of the seven deadly sins according to Christian religion. One of the deadly sins that would bring about your downfall. So one of those sins would be gluttony. So they are trying to warn people against eating too much, being glutton or gluttons. In this case, you would have a character who is representing gluttony. And of course, this character would have to die tragically at the end so that the uneducated people would understand that gluttony is a bad thing. You would have perhaps a character um, embodying the abstract value of generosity, being kind to other people. So you would have a character that represent kindness or generosity. And of course, at the end, generosity and kindness would win so that people would take it that generosity is a good thing, that kindness is a good thing, right? Jealousy, you would have a character representing jealousy, and again, the message is clear: don't be jealous. So this was the kind of place that was prevailing in the Middle Ages for obvious reasons. People were not educated enough. The church was in full control. That's why the plays were all religious plays, addressing virtues and asking people to steer away from vice, bad things. A typical scenario would be that you have the good and the evil angel, and they are fighting over the soul of the character. And of course, we know what will come out. The good angel would eventually win. Okay, so let's talk about Dr. Faustus as actually we're running out of time, right? طيب, we can always stop on this note, and with this item, I'll give you perhaps 5 minutes for questions before we call it a night. Okay, do you have any questions?
No.
No questions?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Is there any way we can fix the chat? Because it's not always easy to speak because of the background noise.
Yeah, I'm working on that. I don't know when. I've been working on it for quite some time now. I promise I'll make it my business this week so that it be fixed. So that next week, inshallah, it will work. I promise you, inshallah.
Doctor,
Yes.
can you give us like advices or recommendations of how to study this course?
Yeah. First of all, there is no such thing as advices. Advice is not countable. So you would like me to give you advice or pieces of advice, but never advices. This is number one. Number two would be, you listen to the videos because and watch the videos. Before you walk into class, try to read the chapter or at least part of the chapter. That would be, like you see, we're recycling the ideas. We keep repeating the ideas. But you don't have a problem if you also watch the stuff and read the stuff over and over again. You will reach a level where you have so many ideas and an overflow of ideas, if you like. And this is a challenge because, as I said, there is more to a course like this than just the information or the knowledge that you get. You would need to translate the ideas into arguments, on the paper. And this is actually what we're missing. We're missing this among and between lots of students. The fact that you may have very beautiful ideas, but you cannot uh, communicate them in a solid, argumentative way. So you would need to try your hand, write paragraphs. Don't just listen, don't just watch, or don't just read. Okay, make it a habit of yours to write a lot, and then make all types of mistakes. You're going to find yourself, kind of auto-correcting yourself, and I'll be there. If you would like to show me stuff that you have written or done, I'll be more than glad to do that to help. So again, the challenge would be to start an argument and to go about defending or perhaps attacking the ideas that you are presenting. Okay, I'm hopeful that answered your question.
Doctor?
Yes, Taima.
When I study to final, I study from book 2 just.
This course has 2 books, book 1 and book 2. Only 2 books.
Book 2, I mean just to final. Not with book 1, when I study to final.
We normally have stuff from both books. This is too early, and I cannot judge now. I cannot tell you why. Why are you? We haven't done even quiz 1, and you're thinking of the final. Just focus on the quizzes, and then later we can talk about the final when the time is right. Right?
I think this subject like this book to quiz, this book to final.
Mesh. Okay.
This right or no?
I don't know. The question is, I don't know. From whatever I understood, is that you're so focused on the final, and I'm telling you that keep the final until the final looms on the horizon. The final is very far away. Just focus on the quizzes now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? One more. Ahmed Abbas.
Please.
Yes. Go ahead, yeah.